Welcome to the Red Rose Film Club, a movie podcast that examines the wide world of cinema through a perpetually lefty, pinko, commie, soy boy, cuck, Antifa, super soldier filter. But more specifically, we love movies and want to create a podcast that would appeal to the disparate tastes of our liberal, leftist, socialist, communist, Marxist, and Leninist friends. Red Rose Film Club is for leftists of all stripes who don't know what to talk about at parties other than movies and politics. My name is Craig. I work in public education and am passionate about social justice and workers' rights. My tastes range, but mostly exist on opposite ends of the highbrow, lowbrow spectrum. And I'm with...
Hey, I'm Hal. I use she, they pronouns. I work in higher ed and I run a food pantry. I care about food access, reproductive justice, building a robust social welfare state, and ending the state's domination through the criminal legal system. I'm a staunch defender of Brazil, 1985, even though its sexual politics are really regressive, and I like movies that make me go, now, how did they achieve that practical effect? So Craig, it's good to be back. It's been a hot minute. We've been living life and being sick.
Yeah, I got COVID for the first time. So...
And I got the SADS one of those weeks. You know?
I've had those as well.
Yeah. So we're sick in body and mind, but we're back.
We are back. I will say I got like the most mild case of COVID I think anyone's ever gotten.
Bless you.
That's
so good.
I know. My wife got it as well, and hers was not mild, but I got like a slight fever, and I was tired, and that was mostly it.
I'm glad that the pox has passed from your home.
Yeah.
And we can be in it safely now.
Yep. We got the ivermectin from the feed store, and it knocked it right out of us.
You just injected it right in your dick.
Yeah,
right
there. Yep. Yep, right in.
So, Craig, what other pop culture are you getting into these days?
Well, this is something that we've talked about in texting, you and I, not anybody else, but I, in middle school, was briefly for about a 2-year period into the WWE, and then I guess it was WWF back then.
Yes.
And during my sickness, I decided to throw on the Royal Rumble that came on a few weeks ago, and I am on board. I'm back in. I enjoyed the hell out of the Royal Rumble. And I know you're a huge wrestling fan.
I am. I'm fully a mark, though, as I've expressed. I do not watch very much WWE in the last year or so, largely due to wrestling with what a piece of shit Vince McMahon is. But I do still watch some of it, and I watch a lot of AEW as well as some independent promotions, predominantly like GCW or Game Changer Wrestling.
Yeah, and I'm excited to check some of those out as well. But the Royal Rumble, it was a blast. I had so much fun. I did not know who Rhea Ripley was before going into the Royal Rumble, and now I'm super fan. Enjoy Rhea Ripley quite a bit.
The worst thing about Rhea Ripley is that she is bafflingly joins the club of Natasha Lyonne in women that should not be straight but are.
Oh, see, I didn't know she is.
She's married to another wrestler who sometimes shows up in AEW.
Who? What's his name?
Juice Robinson.
Juice, that's a good name. Is that his wrestling name too?
I believe that's exclusively his wrestling name. I don't think his real first name is Juice.
Man.
He kind of looks like a little monkey. He kind of looks like the little Capuchin monkey.
Okay.
His face has
It's not who I was picturing for a guy named Juice Robinson.
Yeah, I mean, if you look him up, you'll see what I mean. He just has a little bit of a simian face,
right,
but
let me get some eyeballs on this
guy. Well known. Oh shit! Sorry, Juice Robinson is married to Toni Storm. I'm wrong. Who the fuck is Rhea Ripley married to?
Oh, so maybe
Toni
she
Storm?
isn't straight.
No,
Oh,
she
okay.
for sure is straight, and she's married to a wrestler. I'm just fucking up. She is married to. I can't believe I fucked.
I'm also looking.
I know she's married to a wrestler.
Let's see. Husband. Married.
Oh, duh. I'm so stupid.
Hulk
She's
Hogan.
with... No.
Oh.
Wait. Is she with Buddy Murphy? Oh my God.
Buddy
not him.
Murphy. That's
Who's with Buddy Murphy? Nah. Okay. I'm going to text Mike because I've confused. Yes, she is dating Buddy Murphy, who goes by Buddy Matthews now. And
Okay.
he used to be a WWE wrestler, but now he wrestles for AEW.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll be on the lookout for old Buddy
Yes,
Murph.
But he's for sure straight. I'm confusing the AEW WWE pairs of people that are dating cross promotion. Juice Robinson is dating Tony Storm, who is an AEW wrestler who just came from WWE, who's also quite hot. But yes, Buddy Murphy, you should check him out. He's a ginger and he's really ripped, and he always wears pants that look like pirate shorts, you know, like the shorts that are like ripped in streamers,
very fluffy.
No, like
like
pants
tattered,
that are tattered.
Like tattered.
Yes, 100% of the time he wears pants like that.
Okay, that's a look. Sounds interesting. But
thanks for being on that ride with me. My goodness.
But I loved the Royal Rumble. Other highlights for me, really the only guy that really crossed my path when I watched it in middle school was Edge, the rated R superstar, and he popped up in the Royal Rumble, which I liked quite a bit. And then Cody Rhodes is the guy who won it. I didn't really know him, but I knew of his father. And he's related to, there's another guy, right? Wasn't Goldust his brother?
Yes.
So I met Goldust one time.
Have you, a couple of Halloweens ago, I think it was since we met, a couple of Halloweens ago, I went as Goldust for
I think I knew that. Yeah. When I say met, I was at a comic convention where he had a booth and was just kind of awkwardly standing there. And I walked by and went, hey. And he went, hey.
I think that counts as meeting.
All right. Well, then I met Goldust. He was in full face paint and everything. But no costume. So it was just like a middle-aged man.
He's wearing like a tracksuit.
Right, in the face paint. But
Did he have the wig on?
No, he was bald.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I might have a picture buried somewhere that I took on the sly of him.
Yeah, he's been rocking the bald look for a while. He is at, and that's Dustin Rhodes, is Goldust, the brother of Cody, son of Dusty Rhodes. And Dustin does wrestle for AEW, but he predominantly has a backstage role now. So he is well known as a coach and someone who mentors and helps facilitate up-and-comers and is really well liked in that role.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well,
so he's seems to be generally agreed upon to be a pretty good guy.
Yeah, well, let me add to that chorus for the 3.5 seconds that I interacted with him. It was a great interaction.
Important data point.
What about you? What pop culture have you been getting into?
So I have been thinking a lot about war lately.
Mm-hmm.
So yesterday I took a mental health day off of work and I watched Apocalypse Now.
Hell yeah.
Redux, of course. I want those extra 40 minutes or whatever it is. And a couple of days ago, I watched, and I'll say Apocalypse Now, not the first time.
Gesundheit.
Thank you. I'm a big fan of the movie, and I think that you have to watch it with the extra 40 minutes because I think the part with the Playgirls, or the Playboy girls, whatever, the Playmates, is essential to defining like the sexual neuroses and like violence inherent in imperialism. And I don't think the movie operates the same way without it. But then a couple of days before that, I watched Come and See for the first time.
Which I've never seen, yeah.
Whew! Brutalizing.
Brutal? Yeah.
It is, like, I feel like I need to see it a couple more times before I say this. So I say this with like 7 asterisks, which is that I watched it only one time and I was frankly not in a great mental space. But I think maybe it's like one of the best movies I've ever seen.
Okay.
Like, just stunningly beautiful. And it's about Nazi invasion of Belarus.
Okay.
And like the Belarusian like area of peasant villages. And there's just I like war movies. I am partial to war movies, but there are some things about this that has this very like surrealist bent. I almost was like, maybe I should talk about this in the other section, but again, I feel like I need to see it again. But like, there's parts where the Nazis essentially like fade in and out with smoke. So there's all this smoke
Okay.
because they're burning peasant
Right.
villages, and it'll be like the Nazis come in, they light fires, and then the smoke will like blow out of frame with wind, and the Nazis will like be gone.
Okay. It's almost like a magical realism element to it. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Just really powerful filmmaking that really blew my mind. And I can't wait to watch it again, honestly.
That's awesome. That's always been one that's been on my list to watch, and I just never have. But now,
I recommend
skyrocketed
it's
to the
it's
top.
pretty long, so it requires dedicating some time to it. I want to say it was like almost 3 hours, but it's highly worth it. And then the last thing that I want to mention is I have been listening to my first audiobook ever,
Oh, wow.
which is wild because I listen to a lot of podcasts and I've
Uh-huh.
just always turned away from audiobooks. But I downloaded the audiobook for the Jakarta Method. Are you
Okay.
familiar with this book?
I am not.
Okay, I again highly recommend. Came out, I think, in either the very end of 19 or 2020. Like it's
Okay.
relatively recent, but not like the last year. And it was written by Vincent Bevins, who is a journalist who seems to speak like 1,000 languages, but
Okay.
generally kind of specializes in Latin America. Like right now, he lives in Brazil, I'm pretty sure, and Southeastern Asia are his two areas of focus. He's written for the Washington Post, he wrote for the LA Times. Like he's a relatively prominent, legitimated guy. And this book is about anti-communist campaigns and violence in Indonesia
Okay.
in the 1960s, and how it shaped essentially the U.S. empire and regime moving forward. And there's stuff in this book that just, I think any leftist, one of the missions of an American leftist has to be not to engage in like the white guilt of it all, but to really sit with, ponder, and comprehend like the depths of terror that America has inflicted on other parts of the world. And this book, there's one part where he talks about when these mass killings start to occur, that 5% of the island of Bali's population was murdered
Jesus Christ.
in like a period of a few months.
Yeah.
And comprehending the extent to which state violence has been used as a tactic to suppress communism and thus shape the current vision of our world and of what's possible, I think is really important for us to understand. So I highly recommend it. It's really intense, but it's incredibly well written and illuminates some things like, you might know about Guatemala, or you might know about Nicaragua, and like, U.S. campaigns and the CIA's involvement in shaping the trajectory of those nations. But this adds a whole other dimension, and it ties in, obviously because of Southeast Asia, into understanding the U.S.'s position in Vietnam and Cambodia in a way that is helping me situate the conflict in like world systems.
Sure. Yeah.
That I just really highly recommend.
Yeah, that sounds great. That was the Jakarta Method by Vincent Bevins, right?
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. I always get whenever I listen to podcasts and somebody brings it up at the beginning and I miss it, I always want to say it again. So I just wanted to make sure that we get the title out there.
You should read it.
Also, I wanted to say, speaking of Apocalypse Now, Brando is at the center of two of my favorite movies that are non-fiction, because I love documentaries about the making of movies.
Yes.
So Hearts of Darkness is an awesome documentary about.
I have never seen it.
Oh,
and
it's
it's
so
so
good.
hard to find.
Yeah, it is. There was a pause because I'm looking at my DVD shelf, but I have a copy of Apocalypse Now that has Hearts of Darkness in it.
Oh,
Yeah.
smart.
And then Hearts of Darkness is great. It's basically about how everyone almost died and or killed each other while making Apocalypse Now. And Brando is insane in it because like Brando was supposed to have lost like a ton of weight for the role, and he just showed up in the jungle having not lost any of it. So that's why like there's so much the scenes of him are
shadows
so
and the
shadowy
smoke.
because yeah.
Right.
But the best Brando documentary is The Island of Lost Souls. Have you seen that?
I have not, but I am familiar
Holy
with the lore.
Shit, it is wild. It is the documentary about the making of
Dr. Violet.
Yeah, the Island of Dr.
Dr.
Moreau.
Moreau,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Brando is just insane. Like, some of the things that he did, first off, if you've seen The Island of Dr. Moreau, it's pretty shitty, but, like, in a fun way. But there's a scene where, like, Brando's character who plays Dr. Moreau just has white all over his face. And that was just a thing Brando showed up and did. He was just like, I feel like the character would wear this. And then
this makes sense to me.
Yeah, and then
while
there's
inhabiting the character.
there's one part of it that like is kind of offensive in the movie. Like, I mean, a whole lot of the movie is offensive, but there is a little. Oh boy, I'm gonna try to not be offensive in describing, but there's a little fella in the movie who's like Brando's character's right-hand man. If you've seen it, he's like,
Right.
I don't know what his affliction is or whatever, but like he has something. But in the documentary of the making of, that character was never supposed to talk. He was just a background character, and Brando got enamored with this little guy and would like get him drunk at bars and started giving him other people's lines, being like, bring him over here. Like, and so the little guy that's in Island of Dr. Moreau is because Brando was like, I like that guy, give him more lines. But my absolute favorite part about that is there's a scene where Brando just has a bucket on his head, if you've seen Island of Dr. Moreau. And that's because he would make PAs, he would get really hot on set, and he would make PAs cut the bottom out of a bucket and then affix it to his head and then pour ice into it because he was getting hot. And then one day he was just like, I feel like the character would also do this. So they shot a whole scene with Brando's like ice bucket on his head. It's just an insane movie. I love it so much.
To use something that the kids are saying, the Twitters are saying, let the man cook.
Hey, I mean, the movie's not great, so maybe if they listened to him more, it could have been real wild.
I think that, I mean, I don't know. I appreciate artists who throw things at the wall.
I mean, yeah.
To see what sticks, and experiment and innovate. And also, I love Brando.
Yeah,
so
he was doing all that. And at least he wasn't Val Kilmer, which the movie says at one point they took even prop guns away from Val Kilmer because they were worried he was going to just straight up murk somebody on the set because he was insane.
That was probably a wise decision. And also,
Most definitely.
Val Kilmer never gave us an On the Waterfront. Val Kilmer never gave us a Streetcar Named Desire.
Let me just say that Val Kilmer in MacGruber is... might be his Streetcar Named Desire. I love MacGruber and I love Val Kilmer in MacGruber.
I think some of those more recent SNL movies or movies that are like maybe not directly out of the SNL thread, but like, like Popstar Never Stop Stopping or whatever.
Love it.
Those movies were just a little, I don't know if it's ahead of their time or just people weren't ready to receive them.
They weren't ready for Will Forte to shove celery up his ass as a distraction for I love that whole movie. That movie is great. I love it. Anyways, moving on. What is happening in the world this week that's got you either celebrating or in despair?
So I wanted to bring this up because I was looking into it a lot over the weekend when I heard this news story, and I don't know if it's really causing me to despair or to celebrate. It's just something that I wanted to talk about.
Sure. Yeah.
So, according to the U.S. Census, Florida has the fastest rate of growing population of any state in the union. It doesn't have the greatest absolute number of population growth over the last year. That's Texas. But in terms of percentage, Florida is. We gained almost 700,000 people from April 2020 to July 2022. Damn. That accounts for deaths and births already. So that's net, that's net deaths and births. That's just on top of that. Most of it is due to internal migration, meaning all the people moving from other states, not people immigrating from outside of the country into Florida. And that's an increase by almost 2% between 2021 and 2022. That is actually lower than Florida's growth during the mid-20th century, but really high, relatively speaking, for recent times. And I've just been thinking about it a lot because I've been thinking about like political, I don't know, DeSantis fucking sucks and like what are we going to do about it, And trying to situate that problem in this context. And I'm like, who's moving here, right? And how does this shape what our voting base looks like for midterms? And there is a University of Florida demographer named Stefan Rayer who says that most of the people who moved to Florida in the last year were older U.S. adults at or above retirement age.
Right.
So the answer is they're making it worse.
And Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin. So let's throw those in there too.
Yes, and there's also like some dynamics relevant in terms of like strain on state programs, which are already underfunded. So in terms of like state responsibility for Medicare, things like this. So yeah, I've just been pondering that, how demographic shifts, fucking carpetbagging grandparents moving to Florida is continuing to fuck us over for 2024. So what are you thinking about?
Well, let me continue on the DeSantis train here, and this is going to be something I've already mentioned, but there have been further developments, and that is DeSantis's continued war on public education in Florida. On, I believe, our last episode, I had mentioned that DeSantis had taken aim at the unions. He is one of his proposed ideas that he's charging ahead with is taking away unions' abilities, districts' abilities to pull union dues, education teacher union dues from their paycheck directly. Meaning that what he wants is for people who are members of the FEA, the Florida Education Association, to have to mail in their checks each month, because obviously that's going to disincentivize. Right. So since we recorded that, first off, the thing that was making big news is that DeSantis has decided that AP Black History, African American history, is no longer relevant to students and is trying to axe that AP course, which is ghoulish in general. But the attack on the unions has continued as well, because what he has also introduced in this legislation, paired with the making it where harder for union members to submit their dues, is he has now made it. It was teacher unions needed 50% of teachers for bargaining rights in their district, and that is a tough number to get. It is a very tough number to get. So this new legislation, he has increased that to 60% that teachers need for bargaining rights. And like bargaining rights, literally just like getting any increase in salary, because it's not coming from the states. So without that 60%, unions have virtually no authority. What he's also done is he's disincentivizing anybody to go into union leadership and basically trying to put a cap on the salary that union presidents can make. Because most union presidents and staff are former teachers, and he's trying to disincentivize that. He's also trying to get just unfettered access to union documents and union records and all these things. So, it is a full-on assault on public education, specifically unions as well within public education, and it's scary.
That is scary. Well, and especially like you said, achieving that 60% is tough, but that's simply to have a seat at the table. That's no guaranteed outcome of the collective bargaining process.
Right. That's just simply bargaining rights.
Right. That is, being able to access the process. Yes. So that is really frightening.
Yeah. And like, just to give an idea, the county that we live in currently has 52% membership, thereabouts.
And we live in one of the bluest counties.
Right. Yes, and that
in
was
the state.
And that was a feat in and of itself, is getting to 50. So 60 might not seem like a huge increase, but I mean, he knows what he's doing, and it was.
Is that legislation, or is that something he can do through some
it's
kind of executive?
Legislation.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. It's So.
We can talk this later. I'm wondering who's sponsoring that.
Oh boy.
Who we need to send some nasty letters to.
Yep. Okay. One other thing that I did want to mention, as far as things that got me celebrating or in despair, is, have you been keeping up with the Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro feud? Because it's the funniest thing that's happened.
I have seen some Twitter exchanges.
Oh my god, it's so funny.
Regarding Steven Crowder's contract, but I am not sure where it has landed. So please update
It's
me.
landed nowhere because they never went through with it. And Steven Crowder basically went on his show, and without naming them specifically, but he gave enough clues,
Right.
he said that someone
Who else
offered
would
him...
it be? Like,
Right, yeah. He said a conservative outlet offered him a contract, and he rejected it because it said that if he gets demonetized on YouTube, they take a penalty, which is just like capitalism, bro.
duh. Right.
Yeah,
if you don't meet your audience.
And then it came out that the contract was for $50 million to Steven Crowder, who does like a podcast in his basement with like his dad's friends. They were going to give him $50 million, and that was what he's incensed about. And basically, it just came out that he kind of didn't really understand the contract, a lot of it, and now he's trying to position it as, it was a matter of principle, because I'm against, his new thing is big con, big conservatives. He's going against big conservative. It's just been a disaster for him, and he just looks like a moron.
I was going to say,
it's hilarious.
Simply embarrassing. The thing that I think that I saw was essentially some amount of his fans beginning to turn in on him in response to that $50 million number,
Yeah,
right? Like, it's pretty hard to maintain sympathies.
Yeah, and I definitely, and I think the other thing that he's doing, which is kind of a naked attempt here, is he used to work for the Blaze, which is Glenn Beck's outfit.
Yes.
And he got that contract ran up, and with that, he lost his emailing list. So what everyone is realizing is, before he did this whole stunt, he had created a new website to create a new called like stopbigcon.com. So what it's seeming is this is a big ploy to try to generate interest and get people to go to this site so he can
accumulate the list back.
What
I'm hearing is Steven Crowder does not know a lawyer, has no interest in learning of a lawyer, because all of that sounds like problems that could be solved with a lawyer.
Yeah.
Like, was your initial contract with the Blaze didn't circumscribe that you had ownership over that like, these are all contract negotiation problems that very basic self-advocacy would resolve.
Yeah,
so
100%.
Untold levels of stupidity.
And the funniest part was Jeremy Boring, nominative determinism if there ever was, who is the CEO of the Daily Wire, released a hella long video where like he basically like rebutted everything that Steven Crowder said, and also revealed that like this wasn't even a contract. This was just like them discussing terms, and he just kind of lit it on fire. He's just a moron. Like, he's just we all knew he was an idiot.
In the Game of Thrones, he dies, right?
Sure.
Like, there's no... He doesn't even get close to the throne. He missteps immediately. He steps on a landmine.
To put it in DJ Khaled terms, he played himself.
Yeah. It was like, another one? Another failed contract? Another one.
Okay, so let's move into more of the movie talk here, and we are going to discuss Luis Bunuel's The Exterminating Angel. Luis Bunuel, one of the reigning champs of surrealist filmmaking. So before we do that, I want to dive in our top 3 list, our top 3 surrealist films. Hal, what's your number 3?
So the number 3 that I have listed here is The Fall, 2006. Have you seen it?
I have not. I've seen The Cell.
It is, yes. So directed by Tarsim Singh, who did direct The Cell previously with J-Lo.
And Vincent D'Onofrio.
Yes. Iconic villain, I think, will reflect villain actor.
Love him.
But the movie is beautiful. Big, bold, vibrant colors, deep saturation. The overarching story is there is a soldier played by Lee Pace, gay icon, super hot, love him. Who is a wounded soldier in Spain during the Civil War. And he is recounting stories to a young girl who is also in the hospital. And so all this fantastical imagery is coming from those stories, but reality and fiction begin to blend a bit.
Okay.
And I really couldn't tell you what any of the rest of the movie is about. If pressed to.
Sure.
But the imagery is striking and beautiful, and really continues in that kind of tradition that he began to outline in The Cell, but with something that's a little bit more like humanistic and ebullient than kind of like the darkness that is The Cell.
The Cell is hella dark, but I do love that movie.
Yes. What is your number 3?
My number 3 is by a guy whose name I'm gonna mess up, because anytime I try to say French things, it sounds like I'm clearing my throat. But Alain Renat. How did I do?
I think,
Goodish.
You put the funk in it.
Alain Renat. The film Last Year at Marienbad. Have you ever seen Last Year at Marienbad?
I have not. I have turned it on, I think, Criterion Channel or maybe Canopy like 2 or 3 times, and French New Wave is not my favorite.
Yeah, I get that.
I have a hard time, but
it's very.
I'm interested to hear your feelings on it.
It has a very like kind of slow pace that is very kind of, it marinates in itself a lot. But Last Year at Marienbad, is about a fella and a lady who are at this kind of very ornate like palace place, and he sees this woman, and he is convinced that this is a woman that he had met a year earlier at this very same place. And they had this kind of love affair at the time, but she is insistent that she does not recognize him. And it is kind of this, also a very beautiful movie, but it's just them kind of reliving, or trying to convince themselves of reliving this love affair they had. And like the movie we're going to talk about in a little bit, it has a lot of like scenes that seemingly repeat themselves. And moments that repeat themselves, but it is a very like it's just a very it's a beautiful movie. I love it. It is very strange and bizarre, and it's just great.
Is there a lot of dialogue or no? It's very quiet.
A little bit of both, maybe. Like there are like, it is like pretty meditative, but it is like a lot of them. There is a lot of dialogue, and then like them talking, and a lot of it is like them repeating conversations they've had and things like that. But yeah,
that's of more interest to me. I think where I struggle with French New Wave is when it's like kind of, it's not naturalistic really, but there's not like fantastical imagery or something really compelling happening visually.
Yeah.
And it's just like very existential, and no one is talking. Like I have no, there's no hook for me.
Okay.
So that is why I inquire about that specifically. But that sounds good.
Yeah, it is good. I like it quite a bit. What's your number 2?
My number 2, I listed Blue Velvet.
Hell yeah.
In 1986. It is my favorite Lynch film.
Okay.
And I really, really vibe with the intersection of the psychosexual and the surreal, which makes sense given like the surreal's ties to Freud and later Lacan. But the dream-like imagery works best for me when it's tied to the libidinal. And so like the erotic and violence and the intersection of the two is like teeming under the surface and bubbling up is like something that I like a lot. And Dennis Hopper's fucking insane in it. He's deranged,
performance,
like deranged. One of like filmmakers being like, we have to make sure people know that nitrous is very evil.
Hell yeah.
Performances. Yes.
Just kind of, that was me doing a nitrous pull. If anybody can.
Yeah, I don't know where you get one of those tanks so you can put the masks on at your face. I don't think you got that from a dentist's office. That's all I'm saying. But I love that movie, and again, just also really beautiful use of color.
Yeah, especially that opening sequence of like suburbia and like crazy vibrant colors, and then it's almost like when he finds the ear, that's when the colors get like more muted, and you only get like pops of it,
right,
or whatever. But
well,
I
it's
do
like
remember
the color communicates the dream like quality,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's like as the color suffuses and then kind of dissolves, then it feels a little bit more grounded. But then like when they're, him and Laura Dern are like sneaking into the apartment, or we see the scenes at the nightclub, or when they're riding around in the car, stuff gets really heightened again.
Cool. Yeah. So my number two, I'm gonna pull an audible here because
Woo!
I realized how David Lynch heavy this was because I had my number. Spoiler alert: my number one is also a David Lynch movie, and I had my number two as a David Lynch movie. So I'm gonna pull an audible and say a movie that I thought of. That you tell me if you think it counts as surrealist, but
Ooh.
I'm gonna say Picnic at Hanging Rock. Have you seen Picnic at Hanging Rock?
I have.
Yeah.
Yes.
Uh,
One of our potential future guests. It's one of their favorite movies.
Yeah?
Yes.
I love Picnic at Hanging Rock. It is. Would we call it surreal?
I mean,
Has surrealist elements for sure.
So one of the things that I want to talk about as we lead into the movie is like that. I think there are different characteristics of surrealism,
sure.
and one of those characteristics is the sense of a dreamlike state.
Sure.
And I think that, or a dreamlike logic, and I think that Picnic at Hanging Rock has that, right? That kind of sense that like you're not quite grounded, you're unsure of what's happening and why it's happening. So like, does it have surrealist imagery in the way that like The Fall is like, here, like there's people flying in the skies and weird colors and wild animals? Like,
it's not surreal like that.
No,
sure.
but it is dislodged from conscious reality.
Yeah.
In a way.
For those that might not have seen it, Picnic at Hanging Rock is it's been a minute since I've seen it, but it's a girls' school, and they essentially take a field trip to a place called Hanging Rock, and several of them, I believe 3 of them, seemingly disappear into nothingness. They go on a little bit of a hike, and they are never to be heard or seen from again. In the movie, and it's not in like a malicious way. It's just they're gone, and the movie spends the rest of the time with everyone else. So it's like this singular surrealist element, but grounded in the reality of how everyone else responds to it. And it's just great.
Yeah, and I think that we should mention, so it's an Australian film, and it's directed by Peter Weir, who is one of the directors that just has, like, there are movies that you go, oh shit, him? And, like, he directed this, he directed Dead Poet Society, he directed The Truman Show, which is, again, one of my, like, top 50 probably favorite movies. Master and Commander.
Home. Oh, sorry.
yes,
Matt
that
Gates
is where
lived
Matt
The Truman Show.
Matt Gates, I almost listed this for my, our like current event. Did you see that the Justice Department announced today that they're not going to bring charges against him regarding
I did not see that, but
contact with a 17-year-old?
Yeah.
So we know he did it. Allegedly. Don't sue me. But yeah, fuck him.
I hope Nestor's doing okay. Remember Nestor, his adopted child
from a girlfriend that he may or may not still be dating, and that he definitely didn't bring out in a weird
way to try to act like he has some sort of authority to speak for minority people.
Right.
Yeah. We love Nestor.
Yeah.
I hope Nestor's doing great.
Nestor's all right and very far away from Matt Gates.
Very far away. Very far.
Yeah, so anyway, Peter Weir is that dude, and Picnic at Hanging Rock was his second film, and I do think it qualifies as surrealist.
Good. I think so too. That's why I put it at number 2 in an audible. What's your number 1?
My number 1 is a movie that I mentioned in my intro. It is Terry Gilliam's Brazil, 1985. I fucking love this movie. I do think its politics are regressive. The movie is about the ways in which a fascist dystopian society that is highly bureaucratic represses the man's ability to fulfill his like individualistic liberal destiny of fucking the woman that he wants to fuck and being free of his mother. But its packaging and its general take on kind of the Weberian iron cage of bureaucracy and the way it suppresses life and produces one of my favorite terms from George Ritzer, who's a sociologist who studied Weber, of the irrationality of hyper-rationality. That when we engage in hyper-rational structuring of our society, irrational things emerge from those structures. And I think this movie just does a fucking bang-up job of depicting that.
Hell yeah.
Also, Bobby De Niro's in it as a #resistance plumber, and that's great. Like,
Yeah.
he's in, like, maybe 10 minutes of the movie. Like, he's not in it very much. He just, like, kind of pops up. He's like, freedom fighter, but he's a plumber. It's cool.
We're getting hot De Niro in this one?
I think it's hot. I mean, he's, like, often shrouded in shadows because he's, like, literally, like, a plumber who's, like, evading.
Yeah,
And this, like, also the movie in general is very dark. But the imagery in it is great. And part of why I include that in my intro of, like, movies that go, how'd they do that as practical effects? There are a lot of practical effects in this movie that are just really artistic and creative and bizarre.
Hell yeah.
That is your number one.
My number one, as I mentioned earlier, is a David Lynch movie, and it was a tie. The one that I audibled on for Picnic at Hanging Rock was Eraserhead, which is a movie that I love. But my favorite, if we're calling it surrealist David Lynch movie, I think is Mulholland Drive. I love Mulholland Drive. It is so weird and bizarre, and I just love I love how he plays with the kind of, especially at the beginning of the movie, the kind of, like, fakeness of Hollywood. I don't know if I'm getting that right, but the idea that, like, if you watch the first half of the movie, it is almost shot like it's a soap opera.
Yes.
Like, the sound is fucked up and weird. The lighting looks weird. Like, everything, like, it's this bizarre version of, like, what a Hollywood story looks like. And then as the movie progresses, it gets more, like, dark and gritty and grungy. And it's got one of the great, like, what the fuck moments in all of movies, which is at Winky's Diner, with the trash monster that pops out.
By Bonnie, I can't remember her last name, but the actress's name her first name is Bonnie, and she's the nun. She's
pops
like,
up, like,
in a bunch of acting horror movies.
Yeah, she's great. Like, very beautiful, but she does have very, like, striking, sharp features, which
She
I
looks
think
like a scarecrow.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
She's also, for my drag fans out there, she's one of the frequent guests. She's been the last couple of seasons a guest on Dragula.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
as
that.
a guest judge.
Oh, that's cool.
Also, I have been dying to bring this up. I was so glad when you listed Mulholland Drive. There is, because this ties into wrestling, there is a wrestler I really like in AEW whose name is Swerve, who has a coterie behind him.
Okay.
And there's this one guy that is terrifying looking, and every time he comes on screen, I literally think of Mulholland Drive. Like, the first time he came on screen, I had a reaction on par with the first time I saw that movie.
Wait, because
he's frightening looking.
Okay.
Not because he resembles her in a specific way, but simply just, like, that level of, like, visceral revulsion. So I'm gonna show you a picture of him.
Oh,
okay. Right now.
Okay.
And he's huge. So this is a picture I'm showing for the listener, a picture of him standing next to Swerve. So that's Swerve, who's a wrestler. This is another guy whose name I forget. And this dude.
This is the one we're talking about.
Trench.
That is an onomatopoeia
He looks
of a
like
sound.
the human embodiment of trench foot.
Yeah.
But when he came on screen for the first time, my first thought was literally like, oh my god, it's the trash monster.
The trash
monster.
I'm seeing a lot of face tattoos.
Yes, a lot of face tattoos. And he's huge. Like, he's just a big ass dude.
Oh, yeah, he is big.
Yeah. A frightening huge white man.
He also kind of looks a little bit like the MAGA rapper Tom McDonald. Do you know who Tom McDonald is?
Bless be, have no idea what that is.
Thanks.
I'm so grateful.
Well, good for you. But so also, you should check out Tom McDonald.
I'm going to have another Mulholland Drive moment.
He's... Tom McDonald is like a white guy rapper who, like, all of his songs are like It's just like if Tucker Carlson like could commission a rapper. Like all of his songs are like has the aesthetics of like gangster rap from the like 90s and 2000s, but about like white people white people get a bad rap. Is kind of his entire thesis of being a rapper. He's terrible, but I cannot stop watching.
Man who doesn't understand, and which we will talk about because I think The Exterminating Angel is a great example of this principle working, which is that form and content need to be married for art to be effective.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. Yep. 100%. And Tom McDonald does not check both those boxes. He's also a white man with box braids, so yeah, Tom McDonald sucks. But yeah, awesome. Did we?
Oh, I just wanted to mention, since you mentioned kind of, I guess Eraserhead's kind of an honorable mention.
Hell yeah.
So my 2 honorable mentions, one of them is Sweet Movie 1974, which I talked about either last episode or the episode before. So I won't go into that. And then my other was Daisies 1966, which is a Czech film directed by a woman who made a lot of was very prolific. And I have not seen that movie in a long time. Have you ever watched Daisies?
I have not seen it, no.
But like it's probably been, I would say, probably about 10 years since I've watched it. But I used to watch it on repeat in high school. Like I would put it on while I was painting in my bedroom and just like watch it for hours while painting at like 3 a.m. And it was very influential to like my sketchbook, like me like printing out screenshots of the movie and taping it into sketchbooks. So I feel like I need to mention it and mayhaps need to revisit it. In the spirit of our theme of the week.
And I just need to visit it for the first time.
It rotates on and off of Criterion Channel if you have that.
This is the difference between you and me because my thing that was on rotation in my room when I was just fucking around as a kid was like Jackass or Anchorman. So
I will say I've always been a big fan of Jackass.
Hell yeah.
I hated the Will Ferrell cycle of movies.
Okay.
I still don't know that I've ever seen Old School, like, front to back, for example. But I have loosened on that a little bit, mostly because I can handle shit humor now, and I used to not be able to, like, that used to be a zero. Like,
shit like poo-poo.
Yes.
Okay.
Like, general gross-out humor was, like, a non-starter for me. Okay. And Jackass I always handled because the physical comedy of the rest of it is good enough.
They're just charming. Like the Jackass boys are charming.
I like wrestling now. It's the same shit, you know? Sure, it's like the fallibility of the human form.
Right, yeah.
As comedy.
And let's stretch that human form to see how far it can go.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But also there was, just so I don't sound like, I was a teenager watching like Czech. The DVD player that I had, that my sister and I shared, which was one of the ones that's like literally just the DVD player. I mean, it was like the size of like a VHS case, it felt like. One summer got the movie Disturbia.
That's
Shia LaBeouf. Yes.
Okay. Oh, you say LaBeouf?
The beef.
I'm a LaBeouf boy.
The Shia LaBeouf movie. And, oh God, the fucking killer is played by that guy who's been coming up in the press lately. Dave something, I think is his name. The blonde guy who always plays a serial killer or a cop. Not a coincidence, I think.
Isn't it
whatever that guy's name is.
David Morse.
That sounds
Here, I'm looking it up.
But he was in the news or in the news, I say, about Twitter. He was on Twitter a lot this week because people were talking about him in regards to the Penn Badgley news about like him not doing sex scenes. Because apparently this guy like also has that rule. Yeah. And I was like, well, it's no coincidence he always plays fucking serial killers then. Huh?
I do like David Morse. If it is David Morse. Here, I'm looking it up.
No, David Morse is the guy. Jesus, today is just the day of me saying dumb shit that is kind of correct, but not fully. David Morse is the guy in Disturbia. This is not the guy I'm thinking of.
Can I guess who you're thinking of?
Yes.
Because you said blonde.
Yes.
Vaguely. Okay.
He looks like this man.
Is it, shit. Oh, I'm going to get it. I'm going to pull it because I like this guy too, but I can imagine him saying some weird shit like that. His name is, this is a character actor who I could have pulled it any other time, and I'm going to pull it now. Is it Neil McDonough?
Yes.
Yes!
Yes.
Yeah. Blue eyes, blonde hair. Like,
yes. So Neil McDonough is not in Disturbia, but he is the man who has this shared weird affinity with Penn Badgley in inability to understand. He also plays killers and cops.
Yes, he does. For
and
sure.
they have similar they resemble each other. But yes. Again, sorry, listener, for me being a real grade A fucking idiot.
Well, and
we have some misfiring synapses. The connections are poor today.
And if listeners don't know, the Penn Badgley news is that Penn Badgley came out and said that like he's not going to do sex scenes anymore because he feels like that is cheating on his wife.
Says a man who allegedly is probably already cheating on his wife,
right?
Or had been.
Well, I mean, his name's Penn Badgley, so like.
But the reason I brought up all of that nonsense, which was wrong, is that there was one summer when I was a teenager where the DVD Disturbia got stuck in the DVD player, and so my sister and I would watch it
just Disturbia
every
again and again.
single night, basically. Like literally every night while falling asleep, we'd be like, gotta turn on our DVD player that plays one movie. And after like probably at least a month, I realized, I could take a screwdriver to it and like take the lid off of it and take it out that way. And it eventually functioned again, and we weren't stuck with the DVD player that only played Disturbia. But just so it's clear, I was not exclusively sitting in my room as a teenager watching Daisies.
I also was not watching... Daisies, Jackass.
I was also watching Disturbia more times than a human ever should.
Oh yeah. Do you remember the first DVD you ever owned? Because I remember my first two, and they're lame.
That I ever owned? I don't remember the first one, mostly because how my family operated is just if you got something like that, it belonged to the collective.
To the group, yeah.
Yeah, it was just like, why would I keep it in my room? Like,
sure.
We're going to watch it together, and prior to that one malfunctioning DVD player, I didn't have a way to watch it by myself anyway. But one of the first things I remember possessing, which was like when I came to college, was a set of every Dexter DVD of all the seasons that had released prior to coming
season.
There.
Yeah.
And then also Death Proof.
Okay. Well, shit. Now mine are going to make me sound old as hell. And I'm not that much older than you, but...
Yeah, I mean, that would have been 2009.
Okay, yeah.
I'm telling you, I owned DVDs before that, but like I just don't remember possessing them.
I definitely remember my first two. One was I got a DVD player for Christmas one year with one DVD that my parents got me, which was Jurassic Park 3.
Hell yeah.
Which actually, I'll defend that a little bit. It's kind of fun.
I like that movie.
It's kind of fun. And then the other one, which I got like a gift card that Christmas, so I ran out and bought Saving Silverman on DVD. I mean... I feel like I haven't seen it forever, but I feel like there's some stuff that would hold up. Like Neil Diamond's in it for almost no reason, which is funny.
Yeah, I don't feel it has been so long. I don't feel confident making an assertion.
Oh yeah, because the premise is basically like some women are assholes. so
I'm like,
yeah.
I don't think it's good.
I don't stand by the politics of it. I stand by individual moments, which I remember with fondness. Because the premise is literally like, God, some women are just
Can you believe these bitches?
Right, exactly.
Get a load of these bitches.
But it also has Jack Black just riffing about one point. I remember he says one of the lines that I always loved is he's asking a woman if he remembers him from high school, and the only thing he can recall that he did in high school was that he was the guy that singed his ball sack with a Bunsen burner. Which, if you can imagine Jack Black saying, I singed my ball sack with a Bunsen burner, it's really funny.
Yeah, I would go to the mat for Jack Black. I love that motherfucker.
Kill for Jack Black. Like, I went down a rabbit hole the other day where I was just watching old Tenacious D videos, and it was making me like bizarrely nostalgic and like tearing up, and I was just like, God damn, I love this.
Really, like our Prince of Earnestness.
Sure.
You know, like someone who is balls deep.
Yeah,
right?
like he has missed a lot, but like you can never accuse him of not giving it his all.
Right, for everything. And also,
Yeah.
like, to be like, we're going to have a duo, an acoustic duo that does metal music that's often, like, D&D themed.
Right, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, you know,
It's great.
he commits to the bit, and he's cute. You know?
Yeah, and now he's looking wild. He's got that bushy beard and the long
Yeah,
hair,
I
and he's
love
just
it.
wearing whatever. Yeah, Jack Black's awesome. All right, well, let's move on to our main event here.
Wait.
Oh, shit. Oh, I forgot to do this the last time. Let me do it again. Let me forget to do it again and then actually do it. Just want to say, everybody, the algorithms help us with, getting our podcast out there, getting it seen.
Feed the algorithms.
Please feed it. Feed it everything at once. Please go to iTunes or Google Podcasts or whatever app you're using and rate and review and share and do all those things that'll help us get the podcast out there. So with that, let's dive into the main event, which is Luis Bunuel's The Exterminating Angel.
We're going to take a walk down Providence Street.
Hell yeah. The original title.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love. It's such a great way to start the movie. Before we like fully dive into the movie, I do want to talk about the surrealist movement
Yeah, for sure.
and some of the stuff related to Bunuel's like artistic approach that maybe doesn't fit super neatly into like a specific part of the movie.
Mhm.
But I just want to provide some background on him. So Bunuel was really like a middle class guy who rejected bourgeois morality. He wasn't really like of the working class, but he didn't come from a wealthy family. And he was really notably really opposed to Franco.
Mhm.
And was kind of repeatedly in exile. So there's like multiple periods of his life, including the one in which he made this film in Mexico, where he is like leaving Spain, coming back, leaving Spain again, because Franco's like pissed off about
Sure.
his art. So that's like a little background on him. Is there any background on him specifically before we talk about like broadly surrealist film that you want to?
Yeah, no, I mean, he did eventually return to Spain, right?
Yes,
He ended his career in Spain. But yeah, because he was in America for a while. I think he get like booted from the he had like a I'm gonna look this up because he got like booted for being a communist out of America. Basically, he got chased out of America because people thought he was a communist. I think he had like he was like a fellow with the Guggenheim or something like that, and eventually got the axe because people suspected him of being a communist.
Right.
Yeah, so he was kind of a guy just like politically adrift for a lot of his career.
Yeah, he was definitely a leftist, but not as like explicitly politically involved as maybe some of his compatriots. Sure. Now, in terms of like surrealist film, this connects back to something that kind of was talking about when we were talking about our top 3, which is that like what do we mean when we talk about surrealist film? Now, there's a couple of different things. There's one, the fact that there is a surrealist art movement, like capital S, a group of people, or really, most accurately, groups of people who were animated by some core concepts to make art thematically in concentrated, like, geographic space in specific time periods, right? And he was part of that. So really, we think of kind of formalistically the surrealist art movement starting in 1924 with the publication of the first Surrealist Manifesto, and that kind of extends into the 70s. That's different than saying, like we did with our top 3, of like, these are movies that are surrealist, right? Like they might have characteristics of a surrealist film. And Bunuel was of the surrealist movement and also was making surrealist movies. And that as it relates to the surrealist movement, when we talk about surrealist film, it's about process, but it's also about outcome. So an example of process would be surrealists were really obsessed with this idea of fortuitous encounters, or sometimes called chance encounters, which were the idea that you could essentially like automate art by like generating a situation and then art emerging from that. And that is different. That's process, right? That's a surrealist process, where a surrealist outcome might be something that resembles a dream.
Sure.
Okay. So, Bunuel was known to use both. He did use these kind of chance encounters that were intended by the surrealists from a leftist perspective to counteract rational bourgeois civilization. If we look at Un Chien Andalou, one of his most famous films, which he made with Salvador Dali in the late 1920s, I think it came out in 29, and subject of one of my favorite songs, Debaser by Pixies,
yeah.
one of my favorite karaoke songs.
And for those who might not know, that's the one with the image that's very widely, when we talk about surrealist films, of the eyeball with the razor blade going across it.
Right, which was achieved by them using a cow eyeball held in front of a woman's face.
Okay.
Yeah. But regarding Un Chien Andalou, which means like an Andalusian dog, Bunuel said that movie was the result of conscious psychic atomism, meaning like it wasn't the ideas that it represents and the images that are on the screen came from automatic processes. So one of these things would be like the free association game, right? Would be an example of a surrealist action that is capturing automatism. Regarding this, I watched a video on Criterion Channel where they have like different interviews and stuff that are associated with the movie. And there's this guy, Arturo Ripstein, that was interviewed, who was an uncredited AD, assistant director, on some of Bunuel's work. And his dad was like a big shot producer in Mexico. And he went on to make a lot of movies. He's super duper prolific. And he kind of gave some examples of what that meant for Bunuel, and specifically as it related to the Exterminating Angel. What does it mean to try and capture these fortuitous encounters, right? This automation of process. And Arturo said that Bunuel gave the actors very specific directions, but did not provide extensive detail or explanation for interpretation. So he's not like providing motivation, giving, here's the frame of mind that you need to have. He will just say, you go stand over there and say this. And then if he tells all these different people this, right, what emerges from that is a chance encounter. Like what the film captures is a chance encounter of all of these different factors that Bunuel has placed in the scene, right? Arturo said Bunuel would also do things, including like on The Exterminating Angel, make the actors run around the set a bunch of times before they started, to kind of get them like activated.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And having like a specific bodily, like an agitated bodily experience to embody that, again, just kind of like is producing outcomes. And also, Arturo said in this interview that Bunuel did not storyboard, that he just made the film as he filmed it. So he had these like, broad ideas or circumstances that he intended to capture, but everything that kind of emerged out of it was a surrealist process, not just the outcome.
Yeah, and another thing that kind of a defining like surrealist part of this movie, which I also just recently found out was not planned, is the repeated shots and the repeated sequences. I was reading an interview with Bunuel who said that like that was not planned at all. He did that on the spot. Like when you watch the movie, there are scenes where people get introduced to each other multiple times. When they first come in, they walk up the stairs, and then it is immediately followed by them walking up the same set of stairs again. And those were all kind of like on the fly improvisations that he made.
I love that, because I think that ties into, I wanted to read this quote from Bunuel because I think it helps contextualize what you're saying there and generally the movie, which is that, before I get to the quote, that part of the surrealist outcome is this emphasis on tapping into the unconscious, the unexpressed, the vestigial, that which is languishing underneath, but it's not the same as that which is idealized, right? It's not like this external object. It's like what's writhing underneath. And there's this Freudian idea that language always has precedence, meaning that like language is the most prime fundamental expression of thought. And Arturo Ripstein, again, that interview said that Bunuel was like not impressed by pictorialism, which many non-Mexican directors who worked in Mexico at the time were like very obsessed with like the landscape of Mexico and being like, this is really beautiful, right? And it's like Bunuel said, no, I'm interested in surrealist process and I'm interested in surrealist outcome. And to that end, before we get into the full discussion of the movie, I want to read this quote from Bunuel from a 1953 lecture at the University of Mexico. So he said, and I quote, "In the hands of a free spirit, the cinema is a magnificent and dangerous weapon. On the screen, as with the human being, the nocturnal voyage into the unconscious begins. The device of fading allows images to appear and disappear as in a dream. Time and space are flexible, shrinking and expanding at will. Chronological order and the relative values of time duration no longer correspond to reality." Right? So, and I'll read off some sources at the very end after we talk about the movie. But I thought that captured, we were talking about where there's scenes that are repeating, where there's a temporal dislodging that's happening.
100%. Yeah, it is very non-linear in the sense that there is you never quite know where you are in the timeline of their evening or of their like stay. And for those that might not have seen The Exterminating Angel, first off, go watch it. It's awesome. But the general premise is a group of like bougie rich folks, after kind of a night on the town, all retire to the home of their host, who is Edmundo and Lucia, and they go to kind of the parlor room for their kind of nightcap, and then find themselves, for whatever reason, physically unable to leave the room. There's nothing blocking them. They just cannot leave the room.
I will also note, until the end, we don't really see them try to leave the room either. They simply express that they can't leave the room.
They can't, yeah.
Or it's implied that they can't by the fact that they haven't, and horrible things are happening.
Yeah, and there's moments where, like, they never say, I can't leave the room. Well, eventually they do, but there's moments early on where people will approach the threshold and kind of look at it as if they're examining what is there that is keeping them in there. But yeah, it does take them quite a while to like actually vocalize the fact that they cannot leave the room. So yeah, let's dive into it. Filled with the extravagances of wealth, including a domesticated bear and a flock of sheep that seemingly just roam through the home. The Exterminating Angel begins with Edmundo and Lucia taking turns berating the staff of cooks and maids that live in their home. One of the cooks even tells Lucia that his sister has fallen ill and he must leave, and she just fires him on the spot. And then the first kind of hint that something is off is that the remaining staff, for whatever reason, seem almost in a panic and hurried to leave the home and get off of the properties. Leading one of the guests to say that the domestic help grows more impertinent by the day. So what do we make of, first off, the introduction to Edmundo and Lucia as kind of these tyrant bosses of their servants in their home?
Yeah, I generally interpret the working class members fleeing as like that it indicates something about the ways in which the bourgeoisie is kind of this insular, kind of hermetically sealed, like festering boil, and that the working class members, like what agency they have is to get the fuck away from it.
And I really love how like none of them seem really to understand why they want to get the fuck away from it, but they are panicked to like leave in their shifts, get off of the premises, except for one who is the butler, kind of the the lead of the servants around the home who does end up staying.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like we don't, because it's not who James Cameron is as a director, right? But if that last third of the Titanic, instead of people standing and playing the quartet on the deck as they, as it slides around, instead if they were like, "Okay, bye,"
Right?
Get on the boat.
I see where this is going. Yeah,
right, exactly. But he does. It's a different audience, different intent.
Yeah, so we meet. I believe there are 18 guests in total, and we usually like to track the characters, but for the sake of time, we don't need to go through all of them. I'll just name a few of them. Edmundo and Lucia are our hosts who are throwing this party. Some of the more prominent ones are Letitia, who is introduced as the Valkyrie or the Ferocious Virgin.
She's also the only blonde?
I believe so. Yeah. There is the Colonel Aranda, who is having an affair with Lucia, the woman of the house, and there is Sergio, who's kind of the eccentric that they describe as a tough cookie. So there's a number of these kind of like different types.
There's a
conductor. Yep.
There's the weird sibling couple, which I definitely want to talk about, because the gender politic of this movie is very interesting, especially them, because they're very inverted or negation of each other.
Yep. There is a pianist. There is a painter. There is a guy who Christian, who's kind of my favorite, just because he's like, his defining characteristic is that he has an ulcer and he's kind of annoying.
He's struggling. He's ready to struggle with.
Which I like quite a bit. But yeah, there's a number of these characters that represent kind of different paths of the like elite bourgeois who all come together. And if you're wondering what kind of party it is a caviar served on an ice swan kind of party. So it is a bougie ass party.
It is very bougie. I'm going to say the kind of the temporal breakdown that we talked about kind of in that intro, that's kind of reoccurring throughout the film, starts really early on. And some of it is through, imagery, repetition, these things, but also some of it is we hear the staff before they flee talk about how the hostess wants the main course served first.
Okay.
Right? Like, it's like the ordering, your understanding of what the logical ordering of this situation should be is totally disrupted. And she also, in that same, as that scene kind of progresses, she also kind of displaces their setting and fictionalizes it by having this fabricated scenario where the server trips and spills a bunch of stuff, and you hear the guests, kind of gossiping about it and saying, "Oh, it's just like the theater. She's just like the theater here." And she's going to bring out the bear, but she aborts it because she hears them talking about it. So there's like all these things very early on that situate this as illogical, not factual, and not based in like the standard linear progression of time.
Yeah, and it's early on where we see those multiple shots or the same things happen again and again. Like, we see them go up the stairs twice. We see Edmundo give the exact same toast twice in a row, seemingly without anyone batting an eye at it at all. And then the other thing that I do want to mention, so it doesn't get lost, is that this movie is funny as shit in certain parts.
Yes.
Yeah, like
one of my notes was there is a Marx Brother sentiment to it in the wordplay, the puns and double meanings, and then I felt really validated because one of the articles, or one of the books I was reading, that again I'll source at the end, was like, yes, this Marx Brothers sense of humor, and I was like, yes, it very much is capturing absurdity very explicitly.
Yeah, and I want to point out a few of the things that made me generally laugh out loud, and one of the first one was there's a character who has cancer that everyone is very concerned about, and one person is like fretting about her physical appearance and says, my God, she's going to be completely bald. And there's a pregnant pause, and another one says, well, she has a nice head. Which I don't, like, it's just a great...
The doctor, the
yeah.
doctor is the one that says she's going to be completely bald in 3 months, because the initial wave of humor in that is you hear them talking about the cancer and the guy's expressing concern. The doctor's response is, "Oh yeah, she's going to be bald." And it's like, okay,
bald ass.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then early on, we do start to get some of the peeks into the like really surreal shit that we'll see later. Which one is I think it's Bianca, I'm not sure, the piano player that has a purse filled with chicken feathers and chicken feet, which comes into play later.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that obviously comes into play later in terms of like the mysticism and relying on mysticism. But I also kept thinking there's a lot of, it's a common theme in paintings, to use a purse as a symbol for a woman's vagina.
Okay.
Or womb.
Okay.
And so there was kind of this, I interpret it not as it having like a very specific directed narrative meaning, but just kind of this like unconscious revelation of, that she's hiding something.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, as the movie progresses, we start to get kind of a recurring theme, which I love, is the way that the bougie people are desperate to keep up appearances, and that is something that comes up again and again. And the first time we see it, and the first hint we get that something is really wrong, is the party begins to take an odd turn, and guests are commenting how late it is and how tired they are and how long of a night it's been. Yet none of them are leaving. Not even making a motion to leave. And some even begin to resent Edmundo and Lucia for not formally dismissing them, while Edmundo and Lucia are resenting them for removing their coats and becoming more comfortable.
And then saying that they have to do the same to save face for their guests.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's one of the genius parts about this movie, is demonstrating the ways in which etiquette and manners and cultural capital are self-enforcing prisons.
Sure, yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's not, no one else is like putting that on them. Y'all dumbasses created that to gatekeep other people from being part of your class, and yet you weaponize it against each other.
Yeah, it's like a full 24 hours before like someone vocalizes like, what the hell is happening here? But like you clearly see that they're all uncomfortable and realize something's wrong, but none of them wants to commit that faux pas of breaking like the social contract of like a bougie elite party.
Like actually leaving. Yeah, that part I have in my notes as one of my favorite kind of jokes or moments of wordplay in the movie, where one of the women says, "I haven't been able to sleep much since that train went off the tracks."
Oh yeah.
Nice. And the other woman says, "What? You've gone off the tracks?"
Yes. And I love, and what she says after that is, she says, yeah, that was that the same one where she says they got crushed like an accordion?
Mm-hmm.
And then she goes, I felt nothing for them. And then in the next sentence is basically, it's talking about some like prince, a funeral where she cried hysterically at a prince's funeral whom she never met. Like the idea of just common folks' pain and misery is
meaningless.
It's like dinner party fodder, while like she's gonna cry her eyes out over this like symbol of
wealth and aristocratic prestige.
Yeah, so good.
I think this is really a movie. One of the things I've written in my notes is this is a movie about the silliness of the bourgeoisie and their class isolation and petty rules.
Petty rules. Yeah, it gets into that too. Like just absolute pettiness.
No one says no, and thus no one continues to say no.
Right, until they're ready to murder each other. And
It's just an Ouroboros of like nonsense.
Not being the one to break the social norms that they have imposed on themselves. Yeah. So yeah, the first night goes by, and the next morning, we get this striking crane shot of the house during the daytime, and those gates, the iron gates, are like wide open, and Edmundo and Lucia continue to be horrified that no one is left, but also desperate to keep up appearances, Lucia says, well, I guess we have to serve them breakfast now. And that's when we get the butler, who is, I think his name is Julio, who they get to bring in coffee and breakfast. And so we see that Julio can enter the room, but once he is in the room with them, Julio can also no longer leave.
He also, Edmundo says something funny in that interaction where they're debating, do we have to provide them breakfast? Should we convince them to leave? And then he says, I trust their discretion. As in, them not leaving is an indication that we should provide hospitality.
Right, yes. It's so, I love all of that. And Julio, I think, is one of the more interesting characters in this because he's not the rich elite. He is like the butler of the home. And actually, I was reading on the Criterion, they did an interview with Bunuel. They didn't do it. I mean, they published an interview with Bunuel.
He did.
Yeah, he very did. Where the person interviewing him said the story is contained to some degree in the film since the servants do manage to leave the house. The only one who remains is the butler because his rank as a servant is closer to that of his master's. And Bunuel's response is, a butler is a bourgeois at heart. So, no love lost for Julio in this moment at all. Like, Julio is fully entrenched with the rest of them once he enters the room.
Yeah, I think this gets down a little bit to some of the criticisms that arise of the surrealist art movement and its intersections with leftism broadly, which is that, like, cultural politics only go so far, right? Like, that's not a Marxist framework, right?
Sure.
Like, the idea that a butler is a bourgeois at heart, like, his relationship to the means of production are different than someone who maybe works in a mine, but that doesn't mean that they own estates and have inherited wealth and, you know, the ability to dominate. So I think there's like a little bit of like cultural flippancy that comes from that. But I appreciate the game he's playing. It's
Me too.
It's a fun game.
For sure. And the first big thing that we get where shit is really going left is Sergio, one of the older guests, loses consciousness, and the doctor immediately predicts that he has just a few hours to live. And this is actually the moment where someone finally, this is like a day and a half after they got there, finally vocalizes that they are unable to leave the room. It is confirmed aloud for the first time when the doctor says, the butler's strange resistance to carrying out his order confirms my observation. Since last night, not one of us has been able to leave this room. Which I think is a great way of like revealing it, that they're kind of making the butler the only working class person among them, their guinea pig to figure out exactly what's going on.
Hey, you go stick your foot
right,
over
exactly.
that,
yeah.
over the hearth over there.
And actually, and the part that confirms that something's wrong is that their servant cannot physically carry out the orders that they have given him.
So shit's
right,
bad.
That's when we know that shit has gone wrong, is because now our servants can't even do what we've told them to. Yes.
It's around this time that I think some of the really interesting gender stuff starts happening, because there's a situation where I just have so I think it was Lucia, because I have the host there, but the guests are turning on Edmundo and Lucia, and one of the men is like, or one of the women is arguing with Edmundo, and she slaps him, and he says, if you weren't a lady, like, and then there's the suggestion that he would hit her. And then shortly after that, there's conversations where some of the women say, all the men are gabbing like streetwalkers instead of solving our problems. And then very shortly after that, we see the sister and brother pair, who I think the brother is also named Christian.
Is that the guy with the ulcer?
No, he's the younger guy. and he's the guy that's nervous, and he's like crying and being.
Oh yeah, I thought that was the guy with the ulcer, who's also a Freemason.
Okay, so he's like freaking out, and he's crying, and he's being comforted by his sister, which especially for the '60s, right? All like major gender reversal, and it made me laugh a lot here because there's a point in time where he says, "I don't want to hear or see anyone," as if that's not like the fundamental predicament.
Right. Yeah, that they're in currently. Yeah.
But there's this like very interesting entanglement happens of like their social norms breaking down, and these, the bourgeois gender regime of men are providers and women are wilting flowers,
sure.
Dilettantes, is totally collapsing around them.
Yeah, they are falling apart in like every way possible, especially like in how they relate to each other. And it has one of my Christian also has one of my favorite lines where he sits down. I can't remember who the female character is, but he sits down next to her and says, "You smell like a hyena." And someone else calls him out, not because it's rude, but they say, the person who calls him out says, "The rest of us overlook these things in the name of dignity," which is just clearly like, you need to play the game here, bud. We are dignified people, and even though we may think it, we don't say it. But when all of those like things are removed, we see the claws really start to come out in all of them.
And I think an extension of that is that dignity comes from unreality, right? Like that the ignoring things as they are is part of how they maintain their power and, their rich ass life.
Yeah, for sure. So then we get we see them kind of like the structure is kind of starting to fall apart amongst them, and there's a bit of a time jump. I think it's about 4 days.
Yes, because that's what the police say.
Right. Yeah, we don't see that until we get our first like kind of scene of what's happening on the outside, with like the police and the press gathering outside the home, which is when we also learn that not only can they not leave the house, but no one can enter the house either for similar mysterious reasons. They just find themselves unable to physically enter the home.
Yeah. Also, I would say immediately before that happens is another really funny moment that I love of that like horny couple being in the closet. Is like behind the Christian iconography, and they're like clearly fucking, and one of them says, I think it was the man says, "Back to the fold." Yeah. And then she says death, like, which I assume is supposed to be like a le petit mort, like, the little death, the French phrase for orgasm. But that was again like just a moment where I was like, this is so funny.
Yeah. Good and job. Also a bit of foreshadowing because it's also
then they die.
They do in fact die. Yes. And then we start, so we jump ahead to day 4, and this is where we get the moment of them like breaking down the wall to try to crack the water main so they can get water, and they all become like just absolute savages towards each other to push each other out of the way to get the water that is just literally exploding from the walls.
I think it's also, and maybe maybe this is me like reading too much into it, maybe this is like a classic surrealist moment where it's like, yes, the point of the unconscious is that like your own unconscious is projected upon it, but this made me think a lot of like when the bourgeoisie say that they want to solve a problem, but instead of solving the fucking problem, aka exiting the house, they do something nonsensical and sideways, i.e. here hacking at the brick wall with an axe. So like, no, we don't need to like solve poverty. Instead, we will create all these foundations and charities and this whole other like exogenous arm of the state that's not the state to like kind of address these things but not really address them and spend a whole bunch of resources that, like,
create a new problem that solves the old problem in a very temporary way.
Right. So it's just like it kind of reminded me of that. It's like we just have to instead of solving the actual problem, getting to the root of it, i.e. leaving, no, we need to hack at the wall with an axe.
Right. Yeah.
Or eat paper, because
I love Julio eating paper and like kind of kind of like preaching the benefits of eating paper too, and the way he's describing
selling it.
He is,
selling
for sure selling the eating of the paper.
Yeah.
There is a shot right around this time that I love so much, which is like a kind of foreground, background, middle ground shot of these bougie people comforting themselves with these empty comforts. We see the one woman is just mindlessly combing her hair. And like
the
a way,
dude is freaking out.
yeah, because she's not doing it right. And Beatrice is eating Julio's paper from the hors d'oeuvres dish, and then the younger dude in the foreground is using an unplugged electric razor to just shave his neck. So there's like all these people doing these completely meaningless things that kind of represent normalcy.
Which we see someone else use that razor later on their
But they are actually using it. Yeah. But the shot with the three of them like doing these kind of cold comforts, the razor is completely unplugged and he's just shaving his neck.
Right, like he
just
almost needs to mimic the actions of what he would be doing if he weren't trapped in this place of his entirely own design. Yeah. The guy is freaking out in response to her combing her hair, and he says, I prefer hunger and thirst to putting up with her.
Right.
It's like, again.
Yeah, they are some catty bitches.
Yes,
yeah.
Like, no real grounded concerns, so they have to generate made-up ones to feel as if there's some level of meaning and tension in their lives.
So throughout all of this, our beloved Sergio does in fact die and pass away. R.I.P. Sergio. We hardly knew ye. And that kind of like desperation of these people kind of facing these life or death situations continues, and they get more cutthroat with each other. Also, we see how they start to get more. Their kind of veils that they produce for themselves kind of start to drop. We see them desperately looking for morphine pills. And
right around this time, that old dude starts creeping around kissing women in their sleep.
Yeah, that guy is real weird.
And somebody wakes up. I can't even remember who it is, but someone wakes up, and then her husband accuses an entirely different man of doing it, and then the hosts recommend that they sleep split by gender. Where again, it's these like they have to intentionally reinforce gender boundaries amongst each other because they collapse as the other strictures that bind them collapse.
Yeah. And it is around this time where we see the bear and the sheep from earlier begin to roam through the house. I do want to say there are some great shots of that bear. There are also some really bad shots of a man clearly in a bear costume that we did not hide very well.
I love this shot. I think it's actually later. It's towards the very end. But I like the bear climbing on the column. It's like one of my... I love
now, was that the actual bear? Because there are shots of an actual bear.
It's probably a man, but I like the shot.
Yeah. There are a few where like... We need Andy Serkis in this thing because somebody did not train this guy on how to move like a bear.
Oh my god!
There was a few times where I was like, "Is that bear about to like smoke a cigarette?" Because he looks like so much like just a human.
That would add to the movie. I think
that might have been a good. Bunuel, you listening? Get a bear smoking a cigarette in that movie.
Possess James Gunn. Hire Andy Serkis, and let's make this shit for DC. We'll call it the smoking bear. We'll put a mask on the bear. It's gonna be a hit.
So the bear manages to he does all right, but the sheep that wander into the parlor room,
it's curtains for them.
And that is a like really chilling scene. The shot of them quietly, like the sheep crosses the threshold and them all just descending on it, and then the very next shot is like a big ass like leg of lamb like roasting on a fire they've made in the middle of the parlor room, which is I love that too.
I think that's again one of those like the temporal spatial confusion where it's just like, and then later there's not a giant fire
right
in the middle of the room.
And it's at this point where they get really punchy, where a lot of the more obvious surrealism really starts to take off. And this first we get Anna, who is the one with the chicken feathers and the chicken feet in her purse, who describes a premonition she had and makes Bianca and Sylvia perform a ritual with the chicken feet, but declares that it cannot be completed without the blood of an innocent, which is at that very moment where they see... What was that? I'm sorry.
The lamb, the third lamb.
The third lamb, but it's also that very moment where they start to see the blood seeping out from behind the closet.
The dead couple.
Yes, where we realize the couple that have been sneaking off and to not so secretly, have fun together in this very close room, very close enclosed space, have in fact killed themselves in this closet room. I believe that was Beatrice was one of them, and I don't remember who the man was, but it was the couple that had been sneaking off throughout. And that's when shit really starts to break loose.
Yeah, because everyone's just beating. The place is like completely in tatters.
Yeah,
they're smashing what I interpret to be like all the remnants of culture, because there's like the overlaying images, and one of the things they're doing is like smashing a cello.
Yep. Yeah.
Over and over again. Well, someone monologues about organizing a cleaning crew, but not actually like taking the action to do that. And so it's just, again, we see like the collapse of all logic and this reliance on the mythic and the mystical.
Sure. Yeah, because we also get the moment that's reliance on the mythic and the mystical is that moment where I think it's Christian, who the only thing he knows how to do is he releases like an old Masonic cry for help.
And then the old guy says, it's the Masonic cry for help, but in this case, unless the bear's a Mason.
Right, yeah, so good. Yeah, it just these like resorting to these old ways of doing things that are going to be absolutely useless for them. But yeah, as their mental states begin to decline, we see another evening come and go, and there's a great sequence beginning with a short montage of close-ups of the partygoers' faces as they're in various states of like begrudging acceptance of their situation. And then we get this faded over montage of a mountain while a voiceover tells us that the Pope is on the mountain, and we're getting shots of like a saw cutting into a hand and then a
head,
and then a head,
cello. Yeah, I think this is like they are shipwrecked on their own petty desires.
Which, funny you should say that, because I was reading this interview with Bunuel, and he originally titled the film I want to find what his original title was, because he intentionally it was called his original title was he specifically said in this interview that I read that it was meant to invoke the idea of Robinson Crusoe and like a natural disaster of people literally shipwrecked in a place that they could not escape from. So, and that is
what you're saying is I'm a fucking genius.
Yeah, you nailed it. You absolutely nailed it. So yeah, we do get them at the absolute like fever pitch, and it kind of culminates with Edmundo's them wanting to kill Edmundo, comparing him to a spider, and they want to make this sacrificial. They think that the only way out is maybe if they create this sacrifice of their host. And it's at that moment that I believe the Valkyrie, the ferocious virgin, says, hey, we're almost all in the exact same spot we were the night that this began. What if we all get back in the same spot? Maybe that breaks the curse. Which in this interview I read with Bunuel, he says right there that is surreal in and of itself, because if we remember, 3 of them are dead at this point, so there's no way for them actually all to be in the exact same spot.
I think it's again, that's like self myth
of
like we have created this situation of our own accord. We're trapped in it of our own accord. Now we must create our own fictions,
right? Yeah,
to escape it.
Sure, yeah. And it is once they all return to the spots that they were in, they find themselves able to, for the first time in days, able to leave the house, and they do.
Also, all the items, the room is restored in that
Yeah,
situation.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
nothing is broken. They're all.
The fire in the middle, the trash that they've been like heaving out of the room, I believe, is gone at that point. Um, and then we end with a scene where it is, I don't remember whose funeral it is. Do you remember whose funeral?
Mm-mm.
It's one of the deceased party goers' funeral, where they're kind of in another kind of ritualistic space, and we end with all the people in the funeral. Well, we get a great shot panning across all of the surviving guests sitting in the funeral, and there's kind of a great shot where the other people in the funeral begin to try to leave, and we get a shot of the original partygoers kind of calmly at ease with the fact that this situation might be repeating itself once again, and then cut, which I love. A great ending.
Yeah, I think that it emphasizes the class-driven nature of the predicament
Mm-hmm.
by translocating it into multiple spaces and or institutions, right? So it's not like
Sure.
I think it expands the purview and allows you to understand
Mm-hmm.
like its broader implications rather than it being like, well, that was just one crazy night,
Right.
or one crazy party
Or One
whatever.
Crazy Summer.
Yeah.
That was a movie, right?
I think so.
I never saw it. So yeah, I love the Exterminating Angel. So now it's time for us to play our favorite game. Did Armond White like this movie?
Okay, but he did review it, or he has stated feelings about it.
I found enough that we can find some
Okay.
Armond White feelings on it.
I think that the answer is yes, that he does like it, mostly because I think a thing about Armond White is that because of his like stated intellectual predilections, I think that he has to, in order to maintain that credibility, sometimes claim interest in things
Right.
that you wouldn't expect
Sure.
because of their cultural impact and
Uh-huh.
significance.
And I think the fact that he doesn't have to live through the time in which it was created.
Right.
that he
There's
can-
enough distance. Like there's
Right.
no like sorry, I interrupt you.
No,
There's,
no.
There's no like 20-year-old coming at him.
Right. Yeah.
Tweeting him about it.
So, yes, he did like this movie. There's only a few things I could find to support that. One is he, at one point, tweeted his top 10 Bunuel.
Ooh.
Now, he did not number them, but if I'm to take them in the order that he gave them, Exterminating Angel was number 7.
Okay, can you just like read the list? Because
Yeah,
that's crazy.
10, Tristana. 9, Simon of the Desert, which is a dope movie. 8, Susanna. 7, Exterminating Angel. 6, The Young One. 5.
Real quick, I'm just going to say this so I can either confirm or disconfirm my prediction. The reason why I wanted you to read it is because my inclination is that Veridiana, I think is how you pronounce it, is not on the list
Now
because
that-
it's anti-Catholicism.
Yeah, and he is basically a Catholic fascist.
Right.
Which-
So
Well, okay, so here's why he's full of shit, because Vera Diana is number 3.
interesting.
Right? So yeah, it's Exterminating Angel
Ooh.
number 7, The Young One number 6, Belle de Jour number 5, Nazarene number 4,
Have you-
Vera Diana number 3, Los Olvidados number 2, and La Age d'Or number 1.
Okay. Have you seen Belle de Jour?
I have not seen Belle de Jour.
It is
I love Catherine
great.
Deneuve, and I really
yes.
want to see
Oh
it.
my god, what a fucking
She's great.
angel-faced like
Yeah, I love her.
star. God, I love her.
So my wife has a really hard time with any sort of like sexual violence in movies, and the opening scene. So I've seen the first 10 minutes of Belle de Jour, and the opening scene is her getting accosted.
Yeah, it's hard because like her relationship to sex. I mean, part of why I like the movie is that it's not. I appreciate film. Again, I do like emotional movies, but I like movies that are not like you're supposed to be like a deep empathy is not the intention,
Right.
and like it's very much a movie that is about something
Sure.
as opposed to like you're occupying an empathetic role with the character. But it's a good movie.
I know. I need to
Yeah,
sit
maybe
down
it's
and watch
just
it. Yeah. Yeah, I
not
started
your-
it once,
your
and then
partner. That makes
because
sense.
we were watching it together, I was like, okay, we gotta pause
Okay.
this because she's not
If
gonna
you
be
have
able
an opportunity to view it yourself,
I think I
I
have it somewhere in this
highly
collection.
recommend
Yeah,
it. Also, the clothing in it
beautiful.
is
Yeah.
gorgeous.
Hell
Catherine
yeah.
Deneuve looks fucking exquisite in every way.
I
Like,
was gonna say, I mean,
also,
that's just her in
what's
general.
my French
Love her.
boyfriend who's in it? I mean, his character is not good, but
Jean Reno.
no.
No, of course not.
Oh, what's his name? Pierre Clementi.
Ooh.
I watched like a bunch of his movies like back to back. Recently. Oh, he's in The Leopard, which I watched not that long ago.
Okay.
It's not his fault, but he plays like the kind of the villain in
Okay. In Belle de Jour. Okay,
Yes.
cool. So continuing with Armond White, I did find one other thing that I found interesting, mostly because now we get that vintage Armond White ridiculousness. But he reviewed the movie 9. Do you remember that movie?
The like stop motion one? Or
No,
was it
not that one. It
animated?
came out the same year as that same one. It had the same title, except the stop motion one was The Number, and the one he reviewed was the word 9.
No, who's in that?
Daniel Day Lewis, and it's a musical about the making of 8.5.
I'm sorry. What?
Yeah.
How do I not?
So
What?
he did not like that movie, but he did say a bunch of really funny things in it that I wanted to share. He only briefly mentions the Exterminating Angel in it, where he compares it favorably to like Antonioni's La Ventura and Last Year at Marienbad and stuff.
See, I'm not a huge Antonioni fan.
Well, yeah,
He's one of my. I got my hateration hat on
That-
for
that-
Antonioni.
hey, no
I
shade,
personally
no
think
shade.
he's very sexist. Was my feeling about.
Okay, I don't know if I've seen enough
Blowout.
to have a informed opinion on him, but
Yeah.
who else is sexist is Armond
Armond
White.
Yeah.
Because in his review of 9, he takes so many opportunities to just shit on just women in general. First off, Sophia Loren comes up, and he just, for no reason almost at all, calls her a ghastly waxwork legend. Just
That
for
is
almost no reason in his review.
that is so rude. One time, a honestly probably senile person in my grandparents' retirement community. This would have been
Hell
like
yeah.
in 2010, many moons ago.
Okay.
At my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary party, came up to me and told me
no.
that I looked like a young Sophia Loren, and I will carry it. It's not true.
That's also
Listener,
not where I
if you
thought
don't
the
know what I
story
look
was
like.
going.
No. It was like positive, but I will hold that in my heart. That person, I guarantee, is dead now. Like it seems pretty likely. It's been 13 years.
Yeah, they were already old
My
as
grandpa's
dust.
dead, so you know what we got a 50% likelihood, right? No. But so whenever I think of Sophia Loren, I'm like, there was one day in 2010
Where this old dude
where it
was like,
this
"Hey,
old dude
are you Sophia Loren?"
thought
I like the
was
idea that
Sophia Loren.
that not only did you look like him, but he thinks you are him.
So that I hold that in my heart.
The funniest part about Armond White's review of 9, in which he does mention that he does enjoy The Exterminating Angel, is his Catholic fascism about sex especially really shines through. First off, he is comparing, because of what 9 is about, it's, the making of 8.5, he is constantly comparing the two, and he says that Fellini's film respected the sanctity of marriage, while complains that 9 is is
sorry,
vogue
what?
about sexual freedom in the face of personal responsibility, which is like if Ayn Rand wrote a fucking review of a movie.
You know what I don't think about when I think about Fellini? Personal
responsibility. Yeah. Like, what a fucking dork. Like, who watches a movie? Goddamn. Just that whole, like, yeah, what a dork. Who's watching a movie and then thinking personal responsibility about sexual freedom. And he eventually says 9, comparing 9 to 8.5, he says 9 is immediately less serious because the principles of Judeo-Christian morality is not central to the contemporary non-intellectual fashion that 9 patronizes. He's a fucking dork and a loser.
Wow, that's some like deep up the Renaissance asshole that you think that that first of all, the only people that use the phrase Judo-Christian are fucking insane Christians.
Yeah, Nazis.
Yeah.
For sure.
Because Jewish people didn't do nothing to deserve all of that.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, you have to be so far up the Renaissance asshole to believe that in like the year of our Lord or the century of our Lord, the 20th century or the 21st century, that those things are like wedded, much less like dating on the same block, in the vicinity of each other. Like,
so fucking lame.
Sir, this is not the 16th century.
But if only it was to Armond White, because I feel like that is where most of his reviews want to go back to.
Yeah, he said, what if we went back and gave them a Steadicam?
Oh, goddamn. Armond White...
You would see the flies.
Like, it is... Never fails to... Because I thought that when looking this one up, I was like, first of all, I'm not going to find anything that he had to say about the Exterminating Angel. And then I did, and not only did I find it, but like... vintage Armond White of just being a straight up like Catholic fascist about sex in a goddamn Fellini movie. Like, what a dork. I don't know what else to say, but like, what a dork.
Also, I'm sure I have not seen this movie. I can't believe I haven't even
I
heard
also
of it.
have not seen it, by the way.
It hurts my brain. But I looked it up, and Rob Marshall, who's the guy who made Chicago,
yeah,
made
he
it.
did that.
So it's probably there's like 1,000 things aesthetically to critique about it before we even get to the layer that is Fellini.
Yeah.
The core of the Fellini of it all.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think it's the only movie that Daniel Day-Lewis made between There Will Be Blood and Phantom Thread. I might be wrong on that.
That
but
hurts me.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, and now he's retired and all.
You know, usually people say as the like Twitter meme, like retire, bitch. It's like the opposite. It's like please unretire, bitch.
We have Gabe Day Lewis to pick up the thread. Do you know about Gabe Day Lewis?
I do not. No, he made Lincoln.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about Lincoln.
But that, I mean, that is, my God, what a fucking run. I mean, his whole career is a run, but to go like, okay, Last of the Mohicans. Great. The Age of Innocence, great. In the Name of the Father, great. The Crucible, great. The Boxer, solid. Gangs of New York, great. The Ballad of Jack and Rose, great. There Will Be Blood, great. 9.
9. Yeah, it was a weird one to like just pop up in.
And then his next role,
Lincoln, and then
Phantom Thread.
maybe the best of all.
Oh.
I love Phantom Thread.
Yeah, Phantom Thread I love Phantom Thread because one of my favorite kinds of movies are really fucked up romances.
Yeah, like I hate you, but I love you.
Yes, or like...
Or I love you, but I hate you.
We're really bad for each other,
but we can't help
like,
it.
We're, like, fate
yeah.
is bringing us together. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie. I think I brought this up before. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Betty Blue.
Mm-mm.
Really long, like 3-hour-long French drama that is, like, very much that. And I love it. But it's hard because, like, I love PTA so much that it's, like, a Phantom Thread is a great, brilliant movie that I rate very highly, but it's, like, not even close to my favorite PTA movie. Like, if you put it up against, like, most any other movies, I'd be like, that's a better movie. But it's like...
I'm trying to think it might be up there for me. I do love There Will Be Blood, which makes me feel like a little basic
Boogie
bitch.
Nights
but,
is
like,
one of my favorite
Boogie
movies
Nights is
of
great.
all time.
Yeah.
I love the big ensemble, you know?
Philip Seymour
Classic.
Hoffman is great in that.
Yes,
Love it.
And again, those threads of fate that just like feels like people are being pulled along a track towards something that they can't resist but should.
Yeah. Following up on one thing, because I didn't want to leave it hanging, is very stupid. Gabe Day Lewis is Daniel Day-Lewis's fail son who tried to be a rapper who
With Rebecca Miller?
maybe. I just know him as a dude who says the N-word a lot
Oh, no.
and
Absolutely
tried
not.
to be a rapper, and one of my favorite lines of his in a song he did was, if you call me, I don't know why, I think this is his name, but he said, if you call me Gabe Day Lewis, I'm going to Gabe Day Lose It. So he's got the stuff, I guess is what we're saying. Oh, and by when I mean to say tried to be a rapper, like if we're taking like fail sons who tried to be a rapper, Chet Hanks is like night and day, head and shoulders above Gabe Day Lewis.
It's not his son with Rebecca Miller.
Okay.
He does have 2 kids. He has 2 sons, actually. No daughters. Has 2 sons with Rebecca Miller. Gabriel Kane Day Lewis, Jesus Christ, what a name, is his son with Isabel Adjani.
Oh, I don't even know who that is, I don't think.
Oh my God.
Who dat?
Yes, you absolutely do.
Let me look her up.
This Woman in Possession.
Oh, yeah, hell yeah. I love
And
that movie.
in Nosferatu, the Vampire.
The Vampire, yeah.
I mean, and a lot of other things too. But the story of Adele H.
Okay.
The
Now,
Tenet, Diabolique.
now that I'm looking this up, crazy insane spoiler for what's to come, but as y'all know, we have been covering Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire films, and I'm seeing that Gabe Day Lewis has a credit as the kid in Terror on the Prairie, one of
a little ways out.
Ben Shapiro's produced films. So, boy, I can't wait. All right, well, a future star, a star in the making.
May we not be Gabriel Day Lewis. That's my wish for
Or
every
I'm
single one of
Gabriel Day Lose It. Anyways, anything else to add to the Exterminating Angel?
It's a good film, beautiful film.
It is a great film, a beautiful film. We love it so much. For a second there, my mind blanked. Do we have a sign off? I don't remember.
No, usually I just like say something.
Hell yeah, we'll say something. This is it. We're ending. Say something
Clever.
pithy. Is that too much pressure?
I'm gonna exterminate your angel.
Hell yeah. And if I don't, I'm gonna Gabe Day Lose It. Goodbye.
Kill the poor. Kill the poor.